refugee mental health, and then we're going to finish with some wonderful poetry from Jada Pearl via the Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival. So first of all, before Chris starts his interview Q&A session that Susan's going to lead, I believe we're going to have a video that Chris has sent to us. So I'm very much hoping that the amazing Joe Ackerman is going to play this for me so that I don't have to do anything at all.
Question is, what's it like being a friend of someone with mental illness?
I don't know, I don't think of it like that, because I just think of you as a mate. So it doesn't, I guess I don't think of you like that, so.
I got made redundant, and it really, really hit me. I just used to just lie in bed and just used to get depressed, overeat, waste money, and then COVID came, and that's when I decided that, you know, the way out was to attempt suicide. I got admitted into Ealing Hospital. The ward staff were wonderful. The on-duty psychiatrist came to see me, and he said, "Have you ever reached out to, you know, local community mental health teams or talking therapies?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this stuff is." He said, "Well, we're gonna help you now." And for the next 3 months, the community health teams, they'd come to see me 2-3 times a week at home, see I was taking my medication, give me support. And then after that, said, okay, we need to start talking about long-term treatment. Belonging is something that I've realized is essential. Not easy to find that. But I've found it now in a few different ways. I run the LinkedIn Star Wars fans group now, and people seem to enjoy it. So who knows where that might lead us in the future.
Maybe we should have practiced this more. No.
You just have to be patient and just keep exploring, keep looking for alternative options. Just have that belief that once those appointments start coming through, you know, the services are there in whatever shape or form they are there to help you, you know, improve your mental health, your mental well-being.
It's quite relaxing, this, isn't it?
It's very nice. Something that's really become essential for me is being able to catch up with really good friends like Alper. And I think that if you're lucky enough to find one, even two of those people that can support your mental well-being journey, you're doing very well. You're doing very well.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't know whether it hung for you. It was hanging for me and Chris, definitely. So if Chris is okay, I'll send round that little video for you all to watch properly. Chris, in that video, you sort of mentioned quite lightly your mental health crisis, and I think we'll get to that and chat about that. But I'd be really interested, and I'm sure everybody else is, to know a wee bit about your extensive story prior to that, because you were in Singapore, you were in Hong Kong, you were in China, and as a big travel nerd myself, I'd really like to know what got you to all those places and where you were beforehand.
Well, I got into, you know, I left school early. I got kicked out of school. I tried to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and I got into the recruitment industry pretty young. At the age of 30, a couple of friends contacted me from Hong Kong and said, you know, come out and let's make some money and let's have a good time. So I got the opportunity to do that. And, you know, what I thought was going to be a 2-3 year sort of, you know, jolly up in Hong Kong. Ended up being just under 20 years living in Asia, just under 3 years in Hong Kong, 15 years or so in Singapore, and a brief 6 months or so in Beijing. It was, you know, I had a time of my life. And when I thought about this question, Susan, there were two memories that sprung to mind. I thought I'd share with you. One of them is quite funny, the first one. I remember arriving in Hong Kong. It was the eve of Chinese New Year, Millennium. The plane was turning into Hong Kong airport. I could see the fireworks coming up through the clouds, and I thought, wow, what an auspicious night to be starting my new life. I arrived at my hotel in Wan Chai, and I had to get ready for a welcome dinner at a local Chinese restaurant with the team. And as I was unpacking, I realized that I had forgotten my toothpaste. Of all things, I'd packed. My mum had helped me pack, but we had forgotten to pack the toothpaste. So I rang housekeeping, and I said, could you send up some toothpaste? And moments later, the door knocked, and I opened the door, and there was this Chinese lady, and in her hands were two plates. And I looked at her and I said, toothpaste. And she thought I made 2 plates. And that's when I realized, when we started to laugh together, that my life was just about to change. And I messaged my mum in Hong Kong, and I told her the story, and she was just crying with laughter. I said to her, Mum, this is my first night. Could you imagine what's to come? So, and then fast forward, I arrived in Beijing in 2008, literally 2 or so months after the Beijing Olympic Games. And I was walking to work one morning. It was a freezing morning, and I was just walking down the main CBD district. And coming in the opposite direction to me was a Chinese family. There was 3 generations of Chinese family. There was the grandfather and the grandmother, and then there was the mother of the kid, the daughter-in-law, whatever. And there was a small kid. And as I walked past them, I sort of nodded as if to say good morning, and this kid stopped and pointed at me. And it was as if to say, you know, what's that, Mum? That's a black person. And the parents and the grandparents stopped, and I stopped. And it was one of those surreal moments where they spoke to the kid, and they spoke in Mandarin, so I wasn't sure what they were saying. But after they spoken to the kid, they apologized to me as if to say, we've just told our grandkid that the world is bigger than China, and that you must accept everybody and never point because it's rude. And I nodded back and smiled and continued on my journey to work. And again, it's just one of many instances of my life over in Asia that, you know, just remind me that it was a wonderful time of my life and a great experience.
And so then what brought you back in 2018? Well,
I'd say that after nearly 20 years, I realized that, as most expats do, that, you know, your time is over. I think I'd run my course there. I pretty much exhausted all available career opportunities. I'd been made redundant that year, which was a profound and life-changing experience for me, because for the very first time, I'd say the company I was working for 3 years was a company that I really truly loved. It was, you know, it was a real family. The business they were in was something that I really enjoyed working in, which was global mobility. I got to travel all over the world. It was a fun time. And then I got made redundant. And it wasn't the first time I'd been made redundant, but this particular instance, it for some reason, it really affected me. And then following that, I just kind of felt myself sort of circling the drain. I just lost all hope. And then, you know, I realized that I couldn't afford to live in Singapore. It was an expensive place, couldn't afford to live there without a job, couldn't find the right job, because I was quite senior at the time, and there was a big push to hire more locals in senior appointments in Singapore at that time. You know, it was the right thing to do, to be honest. I tell you what it was, Susan. I started to subconsciously think about suicide. And then I suddenly turned on CNN one morning, and I saw the news about Anthony Bourdain taken his life in the hotel in Paris, and preceded that 2 weeks was the I've forgotten her name now, the lady, the fashion designer, the handbag designer that also took her life in New York. And suddenly the thought started to fester in my brain, and I started to wonder, maybe this is the best option for me. Maybe this is the only option, because I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go back to London. I'd been away for so long, and I felt like I'd be having to start again, and I'd be going back as a complete and utter failure. So I ran out of options, and I did it. I attempted to take my life at my apartment in Singapore. And after that, my friends said, look, it's time for you to leave. We're going to help you to settle your affairs in Singapore. And then you're going to come to Los Angeles for 3 months for some treatment and spend some time with my best friends. And then you're going to go home to London. And so within 3 weeks of that incident, I'd basically wrapped up all my affairs after 19 years in Singapore, sold everything I could, gave away loads of stuff to charities, and just said goodbye, got on a one-way ticket from Singapore to LA. And it was a big decision, but one that was quite necessary at the time.
And how long did you then spend in LA then, Chris?
Well, I was there for 3 months. The visa only allowed me to stay for 3 months, but literally from the moment I got off the plane, my best friends had already arranged for me a new mobile phone card. I was staying with them. They had got me enrolled in the local medical insurance program. They had teamed me up with a therapist that came recommended. So basically, literally within 2 days, we had a plan. And it was, to lose weight, to do some meditation, to walk the dogs, and just really immerse myself in, LA lifestyle. And I've been to LA several times, and I love the place anyway. And I love them. They're like my second family. So it was the ideal next step for me after Singapore, before coming back here, where quite frankly I landed. I felt like an immigrant, to be honest with you. I could honestly empathize,
Really?
because after so many years away, I was a complete stranger. I didn't know anybody. I had no real friends here. I didn't even know what my NHS number was. Believe me, and then COVID hit, and I was staying with my mum. I mean, I really just felt like a fish out of water. And it was a deeply uncomfortable feeling for somebody holding a British passport.
So did you feel you were better by the time you arrived back in London, or did, with COVID hitting, just send you spiraling down again?
Oh, spiraling out of control. I mean, I got into Airbnbs. I didn't know, I couldn't live with my mum for too long. It was driving me mad. I just had to get into Airbnbs. Money was just getting sort of soaked up, and I could see the bank account getting lower and lower. And I was just, what am I going to do? And then, and then I attempted suicide for the second time, April 30th, 2021, an Airbnb. And God knows, I look back on it now, God knows what I was thinking, but that was the plan. I got rushed into hospital at Ealing Hospital. Could you imagine this situation where you've been in a wheelchair, going up to the front registration desk, and they're asking you, what's your NHS number? And you're saying, I've got no idea. So they took my details and they found it. And it was almost like there was a glimmer of hope. And then when I woke up hours later, the first person whose eyes I saw were my mum's. And she looked at me, she looked down at me, and she had some idea I was in trouble, but she had no real notion just how far I was going with this stuff. And I looked up at her, and I think it was at that moment I realized I had to stop this behavior, and I had to do something for all of our sakes.
So how did that you describe your recovery as a defining moment that transformed your life. Can you explain a bit more around that? What was your recovery and how did it transform your life?
Well, from the moment I got discharged from Ealing Hospital, and because I was living in the sort of Brent Borough, so I got put into the hands of the crisis management team, and they were really very good. And they came around to see me. I was staying in I lived with my sister at the time. I had a room, and they'd come and see me 2-3 times a week, make sure I was taking my medication. And I asked them, what happens next when you release me? There's a high risk that I will try again. What do we do? And they said, okay, we're going to work together with you. We're going to build a plan. And that's the kind of language that I like. I like it when somebody says to me, we're going to collaborate. We're going to enter into a partnership to help find the solutions. That's the sort of thing that I think is missing from this industry, is that collaboration. And so the first step was that they got me in touch with the CNWL, Central Northwest London Brent Recovery College. And I wrote to them and I said, I've been referred, I've been signposted. Can you help me understand, what do you offer? And basically it's a recovery college, the Brent Recovery College. And this is why I joined IMROC as a trustee, because IMROC helped to create these recovery colleges. It's funny how things happen, isn't it? And the very first conversation I had with the enrollment administrator, she said to me, Chris, our ethos at the recovery colleges is that we turn recovery into discovery. And I've never forgotten that line, because that one line gave me hope. It gave me the opportunity to think beyond not just about how do I mentally recover, but also what can I learn from these experiences? What can I discover about myself and the world around me? Because I was seeing the world as a very different place at that time. And that became the bedrock of my entire self-recovery journey. And I call it self-recovery because I didn't rely on the system feeding me solutions, feeding me services. I had to go out and make things happen. I had to take control. And because of the level of curiosity I have, I tried so many different things, and some were good, some were not so good. And that's what I spend a lot of time talking and writing about now, is about curiosity and belonging and community, things of that nature.
You've since your recovery, you've become deeply involved in Black mental health advocacy. And I wonder if you can spend a bit of time talking to us about Project Soul Stride and other advocacy projects you're involved in.
No, absolutely. I mean, Soul Stride was a mad idea. I mean, I started it August 15th last year. I was in the middle of therapy at the time. And my therapist said to me, I wouldn't advise you to start doing advocacy work now. You've clearly got so much personal work you still need to do. And I was like, well, I'm so bored. I'm spending so much time in bed in this room. I'm not seeing or speaking to a living soul apart from the people I live with in this shared house. I've got to do something. I'm scared to go outside unless it's to the local co-op to get my cigarettes and my milk and food. So I have to find a vehicle. So I literally sat here one morning with a blank sheet of paper and my ChatGPT open, and I started to write down, these are the things that I can reflect on. This is the stuff I've come across. This is what I've learned. These are my commercial skills. I threw it all into AI and I said, I want to do a 3-month project. What do you reckon? And it came back with this idea. Why don't you do this? Why don't you interview a whole bunch of people and tell them your story? I said, I think I can do that. I said, well, let's give the project a name. I like soul music and I kind of like walking, and I want this to be able to have a bit of a cool name. And it came up with 6 names, and I said, oh, I like this Project Soul Stride name. And I was, okay, well, let's just go with that. And I thought it was a joke. And literally now people write to me and say, oh, I've heard about Project Soul Stride. Can you tell me more? It's just extraordinary how these things have happened. And what I thought was going to be a 3-month project has been going now for about 17 months. And initially I planned to interview 30 people, and that was going to be it. And now I've interviewed over 185 people in 17 or 14 or 15 months. And as a result of that, it's opened up many doors, like the opportunity to speak with you folks today, and be invited to write, blog about things that I find out, like an investigative journalist. And I think that's something I quite enjoy.
Yes. So what's your next goals, aspirations? What comes
well,
next?
I'd say I would love to be an extra on a Star Wars film. That's for sure. Got to be one of my goals. But in all seriousness, Project Soul Stride has got legs. It is clearly I've fallen into a formula that sits outside academic research. It falls into citizen science, but it also means that I can gather a lot of intelligence from around the industry, both in the UK and overseas, and try to unwrap it in such a way and share the content in such a way that people can understand it. People like me don't spend a lot of time reading white papers, but what they will do is they'll watch a 30-second video, or they will consume an Instagram post or an infographic. And so I'm constantly thinking about, commercially, how does this information translate to the everyday person on the street? There is certainly going to be a book at some point, and I have a very strong idea what that would look like, because I've written so many hundreds of thousands of words over the last 2 years. And of course, then there's the Churchill Fellowship, which I'm almost certainly going to apply for. I'm still unsure whether it's right for me at the moment, but if I do get a Churchill Fellowship, that will be a major game changer for me, but also I believe for the Black mental health space, because there aren't many, if any, Black men like me who have done a Churchill Fellowship focusing on the Black experience of suicide. And where I would go with that would be Zimbabwe, to spend time with the Friendship Bench team, which would be an extraordinary experience, to Video Journal, and of course to North America, where I would spend some time getting to know the folks over there. So those are some of the things that keep me going, keep me motivated.
So, last question. If you could have lunch with any Star Wars character, who would it be and why?
That's such a brilliant question.
It was quite good, wasn't it?
That's such a brilliant question, Susan. Honestly, I was wondering what you were going to throw at me this morning. Wow. I guess I would ask Carrie Fisher. I would ask Princess Leia out on a date. I would take her out on a date somewhere for sure, to a really nice restaurant, and just sort of sit and just listen to her funny stories about her experiences on set, and meeting George Lucas for the first time, and all of her life. She had an extraordinary life, and that's who I would have a lunch date with. Yeah.
Now, I was actually meaning the actual Star Wars character, not the actor.
Oh, well, then, of course, it'd be Princess Leia then, of course, wouldn't it?
But then what planet would you have lunch on?
Oh, good Lord. Well, it would have to be here, and I'd probably go somewhere in Soho. I think that would be a nice place to go, wouldn't it?
Chris, thanks for doing this. I know it can be quite upsetting talking about what happened, but I thought it was really important that people heard how your life completely changed because of your redundancy and mental health crisis, and the great work that you're doing with Project Soul Stride. And could you send me a link that I could pass around about